We're on the journey once again, this time around with Janelle Marsden. Welcome to what hopefully will be a good experience for you.
Thank you very much.
Now, for those that haven't heard your name before, familiar businesses they will know of, Feathertop Winery, but also the Poulton pub. Let's talk a little bit about your heritage to the northeast. Have you grown up here? Did you move here? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, no, born and bred. So born in Wangaratta, did all my schooling in Wangaratta and then went off to university. So yeah, feel very much coming back home was probably at about, mid-20s after travelling overseas and living overseas. So it's nice to be back here, and my brother's back here and he's come back too, and my parents still live in Wangaratta. So yeah, it's lovely.
The region's a magnet, isn't it? Like
Yeah.
almost every journey, this sort of theme of go away for university, come back again. What did you study at university?
So I actually studied architecture. So totally took a path that was completely different. And then now I sort of think that, project management of bottles or buildings, it's much the same skill set. I still do architecture, and I've still done a lot of regional architecture here over the years. But yeah, more focused now on the hospitality and tourism industries.
Yeah, which obviously fairly hard hit industries, which I'm sure we'll sort of talk a bit more about over this journey. I'd like to, if I can, go back in time to the point where I first spoke to you, which is now well over 2 years ago, pretty much right off the back of bushfires just before COVID.
Correct.
Let's talk through a pretty successful mission that you ended up with, I guess, being put in your hands with a few others in trying to make do of a bad situation. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so we'd come off bushfires, and this wasn't the first time our business had experienced bushfires. So it was well versed that the recovery is not quick from a bushfire. So just on the back of that, there was literally families that had no income for the summer period because we'd been closed from like the 2nd or 3rd of January all the way through the summer period. So we sort of collectively got together and said, well, we can't get the people to come to us, so why don't we go to them? So we put a call out and said, who wants to come to Melbourne? We found a venue in Port Melbourne and really did a pop-up market day within, it was days, not weeks. Interestingly, we took 100 businesses down to Melbourne. The state government actually came in at the 11th hour because my credit card was blowing up trying to underwrite the power and the trestles and all the stuff that we needed to be able to deliver it. And it was an incredible, successful day. And when you think about pre-COVID, we had people queuing for probably, close to 500 metres outside the venue to get in. Vendors were panicked that they'd bought too much produce, and by lunchtime they had completely sold out. We did $500,000 worth of sales in a couple of hours. So the recovery for those people was, nothing other than a catalytic to survive the next piece. And that said, well, what more could we do in Melbourne while the region wasn't going to be able to open up and we'd missed the tourism season? So we collaborated with the City of Port Phillip, and we opened 3 shops in Fitzroy Street, again with a collective nature of all of these vendors from the region, and we're expanding that out to Gippsland when COVID hit. And COVID hit in such a phenomenal way that it was just like hitting a roadblock. It was all over. We had stock everywhere, people everywhere, and business shut again.
So where are we up to now? Fast forward a few years. Well, it feels like a few years, but it's only just over 2, or not even quite 2. But so where are we up to with that sort of bushfire recovery?
So I think the bushfire recovery, unfortunately, was very shadowed by the catastrophic nature of COVID, especially on the tourism industry. So for the best part of the last 2 years, most businesses in Australia or in the world, but particularly if we're talking regionally, have been closed, or if not closed, very reduced in their capacity to operate. So the hot topic at the moment is how do you run a pub with 10 people in it, and how do you fund a pub when it's completely closed? So I think it's important to acknowledge that no matter the industry, there's only a very small pocket that have grown their businesses in COVID, and we're sort of probably familiar with those ones. But with such a massive region of hospitality, those businesses aren't surviving. They've now, remortgaged their houses. They've now used all their savings. They've, used all the entitlements for their staff. So it is very knife edge, and the survival of those businesses, I think, everyone's doing what they can to support them online, and they're ready to, launch when they come back. But what we'll have over summer is probably the oversupply of tourism to those businesses with no staff. So it's I think, I don't like to use the word resilience in a a flippant way, but the resilience of businesses is now so fragile that it's sort of hard to work out how do we support each other to get through this next stage, because it's not like we're sort of just going to slowly reopen and it's going to be, business as usual. It's not. I mean, I've got an ad out for the moment for a job for a venue manager and not one reply, not one application.
Is that right?
Whereas when 5 years ago when I opened the pub, I put up applications and, I was sifting through 300 or 400 applications at the time.
Is it just hospitality? Is it the fact that people that were good at hospitality have moved on to a different industry and they're not prepared to put the eggs back in that basket in case we see the lockdowns again or whatever happens next?
Yeah, so I think there's a combination. There is a perfect storm happening. So there's a number of hospitality people that had lived and breathed hospitality their whole entire life. They knew nothing else. They've now diversified into something else. They've gone into construction. They've gone into health services, and they think, well, this is not too bad. I'm not working on Saturday and Sunday nights. I'm seeing my family. The lifestyle is somewhat better. There's some people that were in business themselves and realising they were probably working for somewhat a small wage for themselves, but not a lot of profit. So they're out as well. We've got no backpackers here because they're not here. And we've got no overseas visa holders because a lot of those have reverted to go back home as soon as they could go back home last year. So we've taken out a workforce of international chefs and cooks. We've taken out the backpackers that were itinerant and happy to pick up whatever shifts they could on their way through town. We've lost a lot of, we're seeing an impact on a lot of predominantly mothers, but mothers and fathers that just can't come to work now because they're homeschooling. So their home demand is much higher than what it was before. So it is honestly the most perfect storm to say we've lost a workforce. There's young kids, but again, the young kids are sort of so happy to see their friends when they can get out and pubs reopen. They don't really want to be, going and working in a local cafe when they can go to the swimming hole with their friends. So I think, I've got some ideas, and I've politically talked about these ideas of where, we could partner with different countries and bring a workforce in, like seen across the world where, Filipinos, travel to Dubai and we really support a community and we work out the COVID strategy with that to get a workforce back into our community because we don't have it. It's not like, we're just going to find it under a rock.
So with that staffing issue maybe comes the consumer's expectations.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to imagine. I know I've personally, just by chance, I snuck in a 4-night escape with my wife in between some of all the state's lockdowns and before Delta became a problem.
Yeah.
And went to the same location that we loved and went there and I thought, it's changed. It's not the same experience. It's not the same. The quality might still be good, but it's just not the same. It was just a different experience, but the price was the same or more.
Yeah.
As a consumer, do you think we have to sort of adjust what our expectations are of some of these service-based industries?
Yeah. So our dynamics change, especially for metropolitan Melbourne, who has been only talking to their own family, having dinner with their own family at their own dining room table for, the best part of a year, 2 years, but, 200 odd days. To get out, what does that look like for them? They haven't travelled, they haven't been out. They're quite agitated about what that holiday's expectations are now going to look like. And then when we go and look at the service model, there's restricted numbers, there's restricted timeframes, there's restricted amenities in your hotel room or your accommodation. It's been stripped back from all of the trinkets and the robes and the pillows and all those things are sort of, hard to clean regularly. So, it's easy to take a lot of that stuff out. And I had the same experience. I went and stayed somewhere and there was no teacup and there was no robe and there was no slippers. Everything, you could request it, but it was like, oh, that's all too hard now. So, yeah, I think expectations change. There's also a consumer that has been travelling overseas for many, many years and they're now in Australia and they have a different expectation about travel and what that offering offering looks like. And there's a lot of people still with money. There's, close to 50% of our population employed somewhat through government that hasn't lost any income, that is willing to put that money back into our regions. But what their expectation of that offering is, they're pretty happy to sit at a venue for 4 or 5 hours with their friends because they haven't had a beer with them for years, for 2 years. Whereas the hospitality industry can't afford that table of 10 just to sit on a couple of pots for a day. So, and I think we've got a fairly fragile, exhausted hospitality owners and staff also trying to navigate the QR codes and the double vaxxed stuff that's happening here now, especially on this side of the border. It's like, how do you expect a 16-year-old to navigate that, on the front line? It needs a lot more senior management that's tough to get.
Let's talk about that border thing for a second. Your venue, 10 inside, as we sit here today, 30 outside. A venue a similar size could have maybe a couple of hundred.
Yeah.
Whatever your normal capacity is, they can pretty well do that in New South Wales.
Yeah.
How does that, just the geographics of it all, how does that feel as a business owner?
So I've experienced the border my whole entire life, but nothing like the last 2 years. So I have a son doing Year 12 at Scott's on this side of the border. I obviously live on the Victorian side of the border and have 2 businesses on the Victorian side of the border. So we only spoke earlier off air about how to navigate 2 border restrictions and communicate that. At one point, the only way to get my son back to school was for he and I to fly to Sydney and for both of us to quarantine in Sydney for 2 weeks, and then us hire a car and drive to Albury for me to drop him off back at boarding school. And I found myself on national television on a show where I was just going, I'm a mother with a child that goes to a Victorian school and a son that goes to a New South Wales school, and I'm only 5 k's at that point outside this invisible line that was established, and I have 2 businesses in the Victorian side and there's only one of me. And I was like, I don't know how to do this.
Yeah.
So in the end, the second option that came out of it was that a friend could get across the border into Wodonga. So on the border there, I did a Mexican handover of my son and 3 weeks worth of food and the schooling supplies. She took him, quarantined him in her house for 2 weeks, and then he went back to school and didn't see him for 8.
It's just so stupid, isn't it?
Like,
how have we come to this? Yeah, and I think the border communities know better than anywhere else. It seems so stupid.
Yeah.
We're the one country. How does this make any sense? Let's talk about, you mentioned resilience. You didn't want to mention it flippantly, but let's talk about pivoting.
Yeah.
Because, boy, have you been pivoting for years on end, and you're not the only one. It's what I think every business within our region has had to do, even if it's been a business that has been going well and been growing. They're still having the staffing issues as well.
Yeah.
How do you keep pivoting? How do you just keep going and chipping away and navigating through the ever-changing world?
Yeah, so I think acknowledgement for everyone that it's at a massive exhaustion level for all of us. No matter what business or what industry you're in, whether it's homeschooling or trying to get your business open or trying to manage your health, it's an everyday what's important to you. And I have fallen back myself on a advice that Quentin Bryce gave me, maybe 12, 13 years ago, where you can be good at everything, Janelle. You can be absolutely good at everything. You can run an amazing business, you can be an amazing mother, you can be fit and healthy and in your community, but not all at once. And, I think for me, that's the only way that I've got through. There's literally a what am I going to get done today? And something will have to wait till tomorrow. So I think being quite true to yourself in your communication to the people close to you and your workplaces and all the rest about, I'm not really coping at the moment and I've got too much on, and today I've got to get my kid back to school and I'm not sure how. I kind of have many years talked about this outside these extreme circumstances of COVID and bushfire, but just in general life, you come home and the washing's still in the washing machine and let's just let it run around again. And, I've washed the same clothes 4 times because I still haven't been able to get it out of the washing machine. But, that day I might have done a great, export sale for my winery. So I think, kind of having a bit of a laugh about, I didn't get there with this, but I did achieve something today, and that got me one step further. I think the other one is an awareness to not focus on social media. And, I think social media can be so cruel, and there's so many opinions about whether you should open your pub and you shouldn't open your pub. And I can't believe that your winery is now a private estate, and I can't, I like having a tasting at your wine. Well, that's great. But if you want to go and spend the millions of dollars buying the asset and paying the mortgages, you can decide whatever you want to do with your pub or your winery. And, unfortunately, we pick up those devices, for me, at 10:30 at night or, 6 o'clock in the morning, where I sort of, scan it to really see if something major's happened. But they're not the times to start your day with a negative comment, and they're definitely not the times to end your day with a negative comment, because it's soul destroying, where you feel like you've done the best you can that day and someone's, taking it out on you at that point. And, we're pretty small minions, sitting here, and there's pretty big identities being, pulled down continuously on social media. And sometimes you've got to say they are just doing their best. They really are trying to do their best. So pivoting, your gut knows what you need to do. And I'm not just saying in business, but your gut does know that this is something you need to do today. And sometimes you just need to say, I'm sorry, I'm not going to get this other stuff done. And there is tomorrow. And I think the other pivot is, the braveness to diversify or sell or offload assets or move things around, where publicly, the neighbour or the other business is going, oh, this is happening, or they're doing this, or they're going broke, or something else is happening, where, you're just making really good commercial decisions. You're actually looking at what has to happen, and you're cleaning up your backyard and bringing the cattle into the close paddock. So after bushfires, I did a lot of that. I did a lot of cleaning up and sorting out, and, even little things, selling stuff on recycle sites and all the rest, just to say, that $1,000, that $500, that $100, that bike that we're not using, just clean up, get rid of it, move on, get the cash, bank the cash, and the rainy days here. We all need those extra dollars to get, across the line. So, not worrying too much about what they think of you.
Yeah. Great advice. Often asked the question if there's advice you could give a younger you. Do you think some of the things you've just spoken about now are the things you'd be saying to a younger you with hindsight? Would you be less about what other people think and those bits and pieces? Oh,
absolutely. And I do have a younger me. I've got a 16-year-old daughter that's, carbon copy of me. And I watch that, that just struggle to do everything and want to be part of everything, and just sort of saying, just breathe and look at those mentors in your world. Like we've all got really good influences, and they might be the guy that lives next door, or the, your maths teacher from year 9, or your grandparents or something. But there's lessons that we often don't want to listen to, but, there are wise people around us that have that advice, but we don't stop at the moment and listen. We're all gung-ho about. So my advice to my younger self would be similar to what I say to my kids, I suppose, is just breathe. Just wait for a minute. Just watch.
Unfortunately, it's your parents, though. You don't listen. I think everybody's guilty of that. If your neighbour said it, you'd listen. But your parents, it just never sinks in, does it?
That's why we've got a parent as a village. You tell your friends' kids that, and you hope the friends' parents are telling your kids.
So true. You mentioned mentors, and often I'll ask people about mantras, philosophical sayings and things like that, filters they might put on their life day to day. You mentioned Quentin Bryce.
Yeah.
Let's talk some more about that. Some of the things that really stick that you hear people say as a bit of a mantra in life, or you see some of those motivational quotes. Any of those that you go, every day, that's me when I walk out the door. Yeah.
So probably the one that comes to mind first is, my mother was. She's still with us, thankfully, but, at 13 years of age, she was given a prognosis of not to live through cancer. And she handed me a letter and said, if I die, you need to read this letter. But if I don't die, we've got time, but I feel like I've run out of time. And I sort of looked at her and she goes, I'll just say one thing to you, is if you can't tell someone else about it, you shouldn't be doing it. And I often think about that because it's relative to a 13-year-old of, shouldn't be drinking that bottle of vodka on the railway lines. But I also shouldn't be, doing that deal in business because it's not right. And I've just been through something fairly significant in my life, and that mantra carried on to, if my children couldn't read those documents, I shouldn't be doing it. And, your children will find those documents in 40 years' time and think, did their mother behave in a way that they're proud of? So I think that honour in how you live your life came from that statement from my mother. Probably the next major influencer on my life, and he's just passed away, was David Hames of Hames Paint. And I met him as a very young university student through his children. And, he just talked a lot about customer service. And, his brand has driven the epitome of Australian customer service. And, I ended up becoming a consultant to their family in property and investing and divesting of properties. And he'd say things to me like, just give me a price for that job. Don't send me disbursements. Don't send me extras. Just tell me what that's going to cost and I'm happy with it, and then that's it. And I've thought through my consulting world, they're so easy to just keep clicking the ticket, and the sort of behaviour that happens between then a client and a supplier is the client just always feels like, God, what's going to come on this next invoice? So, hedging those partnerships in long-term relationships where you win someone, lose someone, that consulting, but the client knows what they're paying. And the other one probably, there's probably two others. Again, I was very young in running my business in Melbourne, and I became very close to Sue Alberti, who became, behind Women's AFL. And she had to take over her husband's construction industry, or their construction industry, but her husband had run it after he'd had a tragic accident. And I was in architecture and construction, and she taught me how to be the goddess in the boardroom, in not losing your femininity to play in a man's world. And you look at her still to this day with glorious manicured nails and pearls and high heels, playing in what has been a predominantly male industry in the football industry. And she carried that forward with such grace, and showing the skills that both men and women have, and how they can be so complementary in an equality to delivering business. And I'm really grateful for her now when I look back, because that's 25 years ago now, that I didn't have to become masculine to play in a male industry, and that my feminine skills actually supported that role, and that I wasn't embarrassed to be a woman in construction. So they're probably the sort of, and when you look back, they probably all happened time I was 25. So time I was 25, you kind of shaped, and then that from that platform you then launch.
I've now suddenly rewound to when I was 25 and realised I probably need to find some more inspirational people in my life. That's good to hear. So, obviously very driven. You've got a fairly diverse business background, and there's so much that we probably just will run out of time to dig into. But let's talk more about the family and the downtime. So, for anybody who does know you, what do they think or say about you, and what really happens? Like, what is that downtime? What's it look like?
So the downtime for me is my family and friends are super important, and I'm probably a little undiagnosed ADHD, but when I stop, and I really stop. And I think for the kids growing up, my children are 16 and 18, as I said, and they were very much brought up in a hospitality industry in agriculture. Like, we were running vineyards and hospitality businesses, and I've still continued to work in construction and architecture all the way through my career as an off-farm income. And it was busy. And what I realised with the kids is that they needed to be engaged in the journey of where we were going and be part of that. So they worked hard, and they've worked hard from a very small age. But we had what was called Mummy Bomb Days, where we would literally get the calendar and we'd mark a Mummy Bomb Day. And the deal was, from absolutely day, like sunrise to sunset, I was at their beck and call. Whatever they wanted to do, I would do for them. And I had read it in a book about grief and emotional support, so around people that had intense grief, and we hadn't had that, but I thought that was a good philosophy to just throw myself over to the kids. So that started in very much, I want to go 10-pin bowling in Wangaratta, and I want to go to, McDonald's, and I want to do all these very commercial things. And what happened over the years was, as they started to get to about sort of 10, 11 and 12, they started saying, why don't we go for a picnic? Why don't we go for a hike? And I asked them, well, why have we changed what we do? And they said, oh, when we go to those places, people talk to you and you're distracted and the phone rings. And I wasn't still giving my whole day to them because of the influences around us. So we very much got into, what did that look like about, we live on the Ovens River, and, we'd sit down on the Ovens River and have a picnic and, light a little fire. And those are the times, if I reflect back, that my kids had the conversations with me that I'll never forget. And it was such a small price to pay, because when I looked at my calendar, I was well and truly au fait with blocking a whole day out for a workshop, or a whole day out for a conference, or a whole day out for a board meeting. But I hadn't actually said, well, this day is actually Boston's day or Zara's day. So I only took one child at a time. They had a day, it was their day. And I just said to my daughter the other day, I think it's time for a mummy bomb day. So you can never be too old for a mummy bomb day.
That's a great story. And I think you're right, because in amongst trying to provide for a family, anyone who has a family, you're constantly trying to provide and think about what the future is for them. And we know our parents and their parents, it's the family thing, right? But it's trying to get it right without the textbook that creates the perfect right, and the changing times and pandemics and social media and everything else that's going on with the societal change. I think that's a great little one that people could pick up from this conversation to try to implement, that's for sure. Only thing is I've got 5 kids, and
That's a week.
The week would be fun. Now, sliding door moments.
Yeah.
Any in life where you've sort of had the chance to, what if I had gone that other direction? Or
Yeah, absolutely. I think about this often, because when I moved to the region, it was around a personal reason to move to the region, and I was very much in the property construction and architecture world of Melbourne, and I was passionate about that, and I loved that, and I made the choice to step out of that and move to the region, and on the back of that had 2 beautiful children, and moved into hospitality. And I remember attending a meeting to observe for Northeast Food and Wine, and another mentor of mine would be Ross Brown, and he was the chairman at the time, and I went and listened to sort of what they were doing and how they were doing it, and I felt like I had some skills for that sort of what the region needed. And I came home and said to my partner, oh yeah, it was a good meeting. He goes, oh, how did it go? And I said, oh, well, I think it went pretty well. I'm chair. And I took over that role from Ross Brown, and probably, if that hadn't have happened and Ross hadn't have been in my corner, my role that ended up becoming in tourism would never have happened. And from that, I became the chair of Victoria's Food and Wine Tourism Council in Melbourne, and then I went on to become the Director of Tourism Victoria from a state position. And at that time I had very small children, and I was travelling all over Victoria for that role. And, I think from that, if that hadn't have happened and that sliding doors hadn't have happened, I wouldn't have never had the opportunities I've had in the region, and, both state and nationally, to lead and influence policy around tourism and economic development. And I look at some heritage stuff now around, the early bushfire stuff, and, a story for another day. But, I know what happened behind the scenes, and I now look at the critical response that we have nationally around bushfires, not only from a forest fire management side, but from a public health side, from a tourism side, from, funding and the response rate on all of those is significantly improved. And when the bushfires came through this last, 2 years ago, and literally it was via technology to say, evacuate now, I kind of looked at that and went, that wasn't there 10 years ago. We didn't have that. Like we didn't have that ability to inform masses of people and masses of tourism operators and visitors to stay safe. So, yeah.
Who do you admire the most?
I think I've got a wide church of people that I admire the most. There's not one person that comes to mind. And I suppose, I'm nearly turning 50, but I remember at my 40th, so many people came to me and said, I cannot believe the people that are at your 40th. You've got such a broad church of friends and people. So, I admire the village that's been around me.
Good response. So the next chapter to be written, 5, maybe 10 years, if we want to think that far ahead, it's pretty tough after 2 years of taking it day by day.
Yeah.
The next chapter of your book, what's it look like?
I think for all of us, we're living a somewhat simpler life than we've ever lived. There's, I think we're much better at answering the important things now than we were able to answer them 5 years ago. I think we don't do all the stuff that we thought we had to do, whether it be in business to keep people happy. We're much more bespoke and we're much more tailored now to what we'll do. I'd love to continue to stay in the food and wine tourism industry. It's going to be tough, and I've been coined as saying that this is now multi-generational recovery. It's not going to be, if I'm going on 50 and I want to work for another 20 years, I don't know that I'm going to be able to recover the business assets that I have to a point that they're clear and free of title, in that time, which I would have thought was the case previously. So how do you then influence the next generation to take up on some of these businesses? And the e-commerce ability to do that is going to be phenomenal. There's still going to be visitation, but the bulk of our economy is going to happen digitally, and getting ready for that, I think, is a bit of a minefield. For me, I'm really looking forward to having some fun. I'm ready to come out of COVID and have some fun and do the things that we all love. Have a bottle of rosé and some cheese and bickies in the sun. All the stuff just the simple stuff. So yeah, the next decade's going to be full of fun.
Do you think that's going to come soon enough?
I think just talking to you about it, it's about refocusing of that being exciting now. We're so, I don't want to take away the fact of, and again, we talked offline about, you don't want to be having an interview of doldrums and like the henny penny, the sky's falling down, but you also don't want to detract from the fact that this has been tough for a lot of people. And even if their business, they've been in health and their exposure level, or, they might be in transport and their business is booming, but they've got 4 kids at home that they're trying to homeschool. It doesn't matter what it is. Everyone's had significant impact. They haven't been able to see their parents in another state or another country. So I think we're going to regroup on just, the simple things about our family and friends and that network. And, I don't know that prestige and titles and all those things are as important to many of us as that they were before.
It's very true. Ordinary people, extraordinary jobs. That's sort of been my mantra for the last 12 months or so, is you just realise everybody's a human.
Yeah.
And no one can escape COVID and the impact of it.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder. It might have shocked a few people back into place. An oldie but a goodie. 3 people at the dinner table with you, alive or dead. Who would you choose? You can bring someone back, famous, rich, family, whatever you want to choose.
I've been asked that question and I've never had to answer it. Do you know, I think the humanity of people like, I met Lady Diana here when she came to Albury in, someone will be able to correct me, but 1983 or whatever. And I think about, a life taken very quickly in a world that she was a very unhappy person, having to be public and toe the line and all the things we've learned about, that situation post. I think her story would be interesting. And I suppose, I don't know. Can I come back to you on that one?
It'll be the first person that's ever deferred in the journey.
I've got a deferred. I can come back. You can come back and answer. I don't have some.
Lady Di, let's make it one.
One.
All right. So you're sitting
dinner
there
for two with a glass of champagne.
There you go. So and then the sweet or savoury, which would you choose?
Savoury.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And being from the hospitality game, would it be something from your own business or something you'd prepare yourself or something you'd...
Oh, definitely something I don't prepare. So I don't cook. So something that someone else prepared, something simple. Like I can't go past cheese and biscuits.
And wine.
And wine. Well, that's a given. Or gin.
Gin as well.
I don't mind a gin.
Well, Janelle Marsden, it's been lovely to have you here as part of the journey. There's so much more we could talk about. I'm sure we'll cross paths again at some point. But thank you so much for sharing part of your story today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.